Hey guys, this is Jacolia of Jacolia Gems. Thank you for once again coming back home, family. If you happen to be new here for the very first time, I definitely hope that you hear something today that will persuade you to stay. If you have not already done so, exactly what are you waiting for? Go ahead and hit the subscribe button. With that being said, we're going to jump straight into today's video, and it's going to be a breakdown about Easter and gotta work in a little bit, so I'm gonna make this as short as possible so I can rest before I go to work. So Easter is the principal festival of the Christian church, which celebrates the resurrection of Jesus on the third day after his crucifixion. The earliest recorded observation of Easter celebration comes from the 2nd century, though the commemoration of Jesus' resurrection probably occurred earlier. The English word Easter, which parallels the German word Ostern, Ostern, is of uncertain origin. One view expounded by Venerable Bede in the 8th century was that it derived from Estor, Eostre, which would be accurate because we see Esther, her name in the Bible, her name originated from Ishtar and Ashtoreth, but we're going to continue to read. Or Erestre, Eostrae, the Anglo-Saxon goddess of spring and fertility. This view presumes, as does the view associating the origin of Christmas, y'all see they tying his hand, on December 25th with pagan celebrations of the winter solstice, that Christians appropriated pagan names and holidays for their highest festivals, given the determination with which Christians celebrated all forms of paganism. This appears a rather dubious presumption. There is now widespread consensus that the word Easter, from the Christian designation of Easter week, is in Eblis, a Latin phrase that can be understood as the plural of alba, meaning dawn. Come on now. And became Estorim, an Old High German, the precursor of the modern German and English word. The Latin and Greek Pesach, or Passover, provides the root for Pakis, which is the French word for Easter. So everybody who look at the New Testament and they see that word Easter, and they're like, yeah, because Herod was keeping Easter. Let's be clear. The Feast of Easter and the Feast of Passover are not the same thing. And the word Easter being used in the New Testament, the word Pesach, being used in the New Testament does not mean that they were talking about Passover. It literally just said that this word from German and English, Pesach, is rooted in the French word Pakis, which means Easter. So again, this is not Passover that is being talked about. Christ was crucified during Passover. We have to remember that these Gentile nations were keeping Easter. Fixing the date on which the resurrection of Jesus was to be observed and celebrated triggered a major controversy in early Christianity. See, the early quote-unquote Christians wasn't down for this, in which an Eastern and Western position can be distinguished. We've said before that the Eastern Christian church, even though, the Israelites had been sent into captivity at the fall of our temple in 70 AD. So by a lot of these times, our people no longer had any control about what was going on in the book. The Eastern stream of Christianity is going to always be more strict because these are Eastern dwelling people, and that's where the Aramaic interpretation of the New Testament came from. And you have to remember that Polycarp, who ended up becoming a martyr due to the Eastern stream, he was actually known for interpreting and writing a Hebraic Aramaic version of the Bible. And he was persecuted for doing so because his stories lined up with the oral tradition of the Jews versus the Christian paganism that had been infiltrated by the Roman Catholic Church, which gave them chance and opportunity to come in and do what we are reading about now. In Asia Minor, Christians observed the day on the crucifixion on the same day that the Jews celebrated the Passover. Y'all see this? In Asia Minor, Christians, Catholics, observed the day, or Jews who became conversos, they converted to Catholicism. They celebrated the crucifixion on the same day as Passover, which is what the Jews celebrated. So these are two different celebrations. And that's on the 14th day of the full moon of spring. And so we see that the full moon in March fell after the spring equinox, which was the 25th. So 14 days after that full moon, you get Passover, which is why Passover falls on April 8th this year. The resurrection was being observed 2 days later on Nisan 16, regardless of the day of the week. In the West, the resurrection of Jesus was celebrated on the first day of the week, which is Sunday. You see, this is Western Stream Catholicism that is being practiced by the Apostolic Pentecostal Church, by the Baptist Church, the AEM Church, like all of this, because y'all are celebrating it and calling it Resurrection Sunday. And so when you begin to look at the statue in Daniel, and he had the left leg and he had the right leg, that was the Eastern Stream left and the Western Stream right. And those 10 toes are the 10 kingdoms of the Ottoman Empire, which they are attempting to rebuild now. So, consequently, Easter was always celebrated on the first Sunday after the 14th of the month of Nisan. Increasingly, the church has opted for a Sunday celebration, and the Cartodecimans remained a minority, meaning the 14th day remained a minority. The Council of Nicosia, y'all, in 325 decreed that Easter should be observed on the first Sunday following the first full moon after the spring equinox. So this is how y'all got y'all Resurrection Sunday, because they began to base it off of the full moon after spring equinox, but they also needed to make sure that it fell on a Sunday. Eastern Orthodox churches use a slightly different calculations based on the Julian calendar versus the Gregorian calendar, which is 13 days ahead of the former, which results in the Orthodox Eastern celebration usually occurred later than that celebrated by Protestants and Roman Catholics. Okay, so let's come on. So, in the Christian calendar, Easter follows Lent, the period of 40 days, not counting Sundays, before Easter, which is also pagan, which traditionally is observed by acts of penance and fasting. And we're going to see. Easter is immediately preceded by Holy Week. Bloop, 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 bloop. So Easter comes after the Great Virgil, which was originally observed sometime between sunset on Easter Saturday, and sunrise on Easter Sunday. And so this is also Roman Catholic. So Easter customs, we know that they Lenten fast has ended with Easter meals including eggs, ham, that's a boar, that's a pig, that's unclean, that's swine, cheese, bread. Now we should know that during the feast of during the feast days of unleavened bread, we not eating no bread unless it's unleavened. And the feast of unleavened bread follows the next day in those 7 days after Passover. And then 50 days after that is the counting of the Omar. You count 49 days, which is 7 Sabbaths plus 1 day. That's your combination of, so what's that, like a 65-day period of feasting. And these are the 3 times of the year that our men are supposed to make a pilgrimage back to Israel. So the use of paint and decorated eggs was first recorded in the 13th century. The church prohibited the eating of eggs during Holy Week, but chickens continued to lay eggs during that week, and a notion of special identification. Those eggs were Holy Week eggs. And so they are saying that the egg itself became a symbol of the resurrection, y'all. Now, I'm a woman. I have eggs. For me, an egg means that I'm fertile, that I'm ovulating. Just as Jesus rose from the tomb, the egg symbolizes new life. So this is telling you that this is fertility, emerging from the eggshell. In Orthodox tradition, eggs were painted red to symbolize the blood that Jesus shed on the cross. Y'all. Easter egg hunts were popular among children in the United States. So the First Lady, Lucy Hayes, made this like a thing here. And this was in the 1800s. This was in the 1800s. So let's read some more. We're going to go to different articles and everything. I'm going to link it all down below. 40 Days of Weeping for Tammuz, Lent, and Ash Wednesday. No, I did a video on Ash Wednesday, which I'm going to link down below because that's a literal marking for death. And so when Tammuz was 40 years old, he was hunting in the woods. And he was killed by a wild boar or a pig. And that is why we can eat ham on Easter or Isthar Day, even though that is against the commandments of Yod-Heh-Wah Day. This is the article I read. He took after his father Nimrod, see y'all, who was a mighty hunter. There's a story, ancient Babylonian story, that Nimrod and Semiramis were husband and wife, and Nimrod was killed. And in, I believe, the book of Jasper or Jubilees, they began to state that Nimrod was accidentally killed by Esau, who was a mighty hunter. And that's who Esau was coming back from killing when he sold his birthright to Jacob. So it is stated that Nimrod died, and when he died, his wife couldn't find his body, but she found his phallic symbol and took it, and she ended up having a virgin pregnancy through immaculate conception. And her son was born of a virgin on December 25th, the winter solstice, and his name was Tammuz. That's the oral tradition. That's the history behind this. And Nimrod is known to be anti. So after Nimrod died, his mother Semiramis began a custom in Babylon called 40 Days Weeping of Tammuz, where people were commanded to fast and pray for Tammuz in the underworld. And so they believe that Tammuz went down, and he became known as the rising and the falling god, because it is stated that when he died, he went underground for 3 days. And when they would cry for him, he would resurrect again. Yeah. They exchanged 1 day of pleasure in this life for each year in Tammuz life, which is the 40 days. Today in the Roman Catholic Church, this has been renamed Lent. These 40 days of fasting will begin on what is called Ash Wednesday in the Catholic Church and many Protestant churches with crosses of Tammuz. And we already know in the book of Ezekiel, when they were marked, and the Tov is a mark, is a sign, is a symbol. It's also a symbol for death. And will be marked based off of our worship. So Ezekiel 8:13 through 14, turn ye yet again, and ye shall see greater abominations that they do. Then he brought me to the door of the gate of Yahweh's house, Yod-Heh-Wah, which was toward the north. And behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. Then said he unto me, have you seen this, O son of man? Today in many cultures, people make Easter bread or hot cross buns. They do not realize that they are inadvertently offering up cakes to the Queen of Heaven, who is Isthar. Jeremiah 7:18 through 19. The children gathered wood, and the fathers kindled the fire, and the women kneaded them in dough to make cakes. And I want you to know that the word cake is placenta in Greek. And placenta, cake literally means placenta. So this is fertility worship. And to pour hot out drink offerings unto other gods, that they may provoke me to anger. And do they provoke me to anger? Yes, Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh. They do not provoke themselves to the confusion of their own faces. Therefore, thus says Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh Elohim, behold, my anger and my fury shall be poured out upon this place. Semiramis, Nimrod's wife, who was worshipped as a fertility goddess Ishtar, became known in other cultures as the Magna Carta, the Great Mother, and she was worshipped as Mother Earth. The sun mated with the earth each spring, and the rites of the spring symbolizes the maypole, which is the asterisk pole or the grove that we see in the Bible, the high places. And Easter comes 9 moons or 9 months before December 25th on the birth of the winter sun. Her Assyrian name is Ishtar, which is where we derive Easter. Easter, the goddess of the dawn, is the universal goddess of fertility throughout history since the Tower of Babel. She began as Nimrod's wife, Semiramis, and then after Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh scattered the nations and confused their languages at the Tower of Babel, which is seen in Genesis 10 through 11. Her images with her baby son, Tammuz, migrated to other nations under different names. And so the Roman Catholics call her Astarte, but later she was called Venus. And the Phoenicians called her Asherah. The Hebrews called her Astoreth, the consort of Baal. Her emblem is the flower of lily. She is the goddess of the dawn, and her statue stands on a bridge in France. The French made a colossus of this image, and now stands in New York Harbor facing the east, referring to the name of Easter or Ishtar. And so this is of their opinion. I'm not saying that part. Ezekiel 8 and 16. Why is the statue facing the east? And he brought me to the inner court of Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh's house, and behold, at the door, the temple of Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh began. The porch and the altar were about 25 men, with their backs turned toward the temple of Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh, and their faces towards the east. You're supposed to face the east to worship the Most High, but they faced toward the east, and they worshiped the sun towards the east. The French Illuminati, Freemasons, yeah, I'm not going to read that part. Let's see. So Tammuz or Dumuzdi, to the Canaanites, he was known as Adon, and Adon or Adonai means Lord. It's a Semitic, ancient Mesopotamian, Levantine deity associated with agriculture and shepherds, y'all. And his first consort was Inanna, later known as Ishtar. And so I'm going to wrap it up because it's a lot of information and I'm not going to go into all this. And so he was associated with Adonis. And Adonis was the mortal lover of the goddess Aphrodite, who was the progenitor from Aphrodites. And Persephone, who was famous for having achieved immortality. So his symbol, Adonis' symbol, was lettuce, the fennel, because fennel green, y'all, okay, and other fast-growing plants. The myth goes that Adonis was gored by a wild boar during a hunting trip and died in Aphrodite's arms as she wept. His blood mingled with her tears and became the unknown flower. Aphrodite declared Adonai festival to commemorate his tragic death, which was celebrated by women every year in midsummer. During this festival, Greek women would plant gardens of Adonis. Small pots contained fast-growing plants, which they would set up on top of their houses in a hot sun. The plants would sprout out, but soon wither and die. Then the woman would mourn the death of Adonis, tearing their clothes and beating their breasts in a public display of grief. The Greeks considered Adonis' cult to be of Near Eastern origins. Hebraic. Adonis' name came from the Canaanite word meaning Lord, and most scholars consider the story of Adonis and Aphrodite to derive from the Levantine version of earlier Mesopotamia myth of Inanna or Ishtar and Tammuz. So yeah, the word Adonai, the word Adonis is related to Adonai, and the Syrian name for Adonis is Gauz. The cult of Inanna and Tammuz may have been introduced to the kingdom of Judah during the reign of King Manasseh. And we know that Manasseh and Ephraim are brothers, and they have a half tribe through their father Joseph. Their mother Rachel was caught with an idol. She had an idol in her tent, so idol worship for them was nothing. Ezekiel 8 and 14, which I read, he was talked about under his Semitic name, Tammuz. And so the earliest Greek reference of Adonis came from a fragment of a poem by the poet Sappho of Lesbos. And this was between 630 and 570 BC. In which, of course, the young girls ask Aphrodite what they can do to mourn the death of Adonis. Aphrodite replies that they must beat their breasts and tear their tunics. And we know that tearing of the clothing, throwing dust on your face was definitely a Near Eastern concept. The cult of Adonis had been described as corresponding to the cult of the Phoenician god Baal. And Walter Burkett explains, women sit by the gate weeping for Tammuz, or they offer incense to Baal on rooftops, high places, and plant pleasant plants that are very features of Adonis legend, which is celebrated on the rooftops of which shirts shown, which quickly germinated green salads are placed, for the lettuce. Adonis Garden. The climax is loud lamentation for the dead god. So, yeah, if you celebrating Easter, Ash Wednesday, Lent, you're a pagan. And you need to come out from amongst them. We have time to self-correct. We have time to prepare for Passover before it happens. So let's get it together, y'all. This is Jacolia of Jacolia Gems. Bye.